Mic check. Hello everybody, this is Hasham Taher and welcome to my live. As you know, I go live every day and talk about sales, tips, tricks, strategies, and I read sales books and share insights with you. And whatever I learn, I want to share it with everybody out there, or whoever's watching, or whoever watch my videos later on sometime, whenever. So whatever I read, I learn, I share, I try to share it with everybody. And the book that I'm currently reading is called Pitch Anything, and it's really good. So really good book so far. And let's read. What do we have next? And yesterday we read about the price frame and pricing 101. So today we're going to read about the example that the author want to share with us. That's the avocado farmer's money. So let's read it. Let's see what he has for us. Okay. I looked down at my phone, 14 missed calls from the same person, D. Walter. I turned off my ringer or less than 30 minutes and the phone blew up. I listened to one of his messages. Oren, I have a serious problem, he started. His serious problem was a deal that had already gone bad, and now it was my job to help. Dennis Walter was an avocado farmer, a guy who got his overalls dirty, a guy who put in long days in hot sun. After 35 years, he was ready for retirement. He had money saved, but a good portion of it, $640,000, was in the escrow account, controlled by a man named Donald McKen. Dennis wanted his money now, and it was his legally, but he was unable to get it back, despite repeated attempts. This was now affecting an $1 billion deal that both Dennis and I were in. If Dennis couldn't wire his money to me, all $640,000, then the deal, a large property we were buying in Hawaii, would start to unwind. So his problem was now my problem too. To retire Dennis' money, I would have to sit down with McGann and make an appeal to have the money returned. This is how I was thrust into a pitch that clearly was doomed to fail. It wasn't life and death, but it was close. This was a man's life savings. I knew a little bit about McGann. He had a reputation as a successful businessman, primarily in the field of medical devices. Intriguingly, while at Dow Corning in the 1960s, he helped to invent the first generation of silicone breast implants. Today, he owned two companies, Medicor and Southwest Exchange. Medicor's breast implant business had looked promising for a while, but the success enjoyed there was short-lived, and McCann turned desperate. To keep Medicor solvent, McGann began shipping money from Southwest Exchange. Southwest Exchange, which McGann brought in 2004, gave him an instant access to over $100 million in escrow accounts. Real estate investors like Dennis had used Southwest Exchange to hold their money while looking for new investments. Soon after acquiring Southwest Exchange, McGann, according to the federal investigators, transferred $47.3 million from Southwest Exchange, Medicor, just like that, including $640,000 from Dennis, the avocado farmer. Now, I was on our corporate jet en route to Las Vegas On my way to help Dennis attempt the impossible, I thought about McCann and what it might be like to confront him face to face. At the time, I had no idea I was walking into a 100 million problem involving hundreds of investors, or that McCann was a bad guy, a criminal, presiding over a large scale Ponzi scheme. All I knew was that it wasn't going to be pleasant. As I drove to Henderson, a Las Vegas suburb, I had a strong sense of purpose. Not only was McCann harmed Dennis, not only was McCann in the wrong, but the lost 640,000 also were holding up my Hawaii deal. I pulled into the Southwest Exchange parking lot and I met Dennis for the first time in person. He was a nice guy, looked like your typical farmer, and looked like a guy who really needed my help. I was clearly nervous, although I always enjoying pitching deals. It's usually for new business. Making this kind of pitch to get money back, a lot of money from a bad deal, is mentally and emotionally tough. To calm myself, I thought about frame control and all the other methods that I had spent countless hours learning and trying to master. As I mentioned before, no situation has real meaning until you frame it. Frames are mental structures that shape the way we see the world and put relationships in context. The frame you put around a situation completely and totally controls its meaning, but you aren't the only one framing. People are always trying to impose frames on each other. The frame is like a picture of what you want the interaction to be about. And the most powerful thing about frames, there can only be one dominant frame to any interaction between two people. When two frames come together, the stronger frame absorbs the weaker one. Then weak arguments and rational facts just bounce off the winning frame. Dennis and I spoke for a few minutes in the parking lot. I prepared my frame, then just like that, I was ready. So we walked into building together and I went looking for the guy who had caused all these problems, Donald McGann. It was 9 a.m. when we walked into the building. It was a generic looking office with a black leather couch and magazines spread neatly on the coffee table. Good morning, how can I help you? Our receptionist asked. I don't need help, I said. Just tell me which office Don McGann is in. She began her gatekeeper script. I'll see if he's in. Rituals like these are meant to be reinforced status hierarchies. But I was there to establish my own status and frame control, and certainly not the supplicate a gatekeeper. I strode past the front desk and down the hallway, the gatekeeper closed, chasing behind me. She tried to keep me out of the office, to keep me from finding Dennis's money. So I had no choice but to start throwing open doors to various offices, interrogating anyone and everyone. What were they going to do? Call the cops? Back at the office, my partner already had the local police and the FBI on the speed dial. Where is Don McGann? didn't last long. I spoke plainly and looked Jim right in the eyes. We want Dennis $640,000 and we are getting all of it back from you today, right now. He hummed and hummed. He threw out a bunch of promises, half-truths, and NBA double talk. But I saw through the gibberish and I had the stronger frame, moral authority. I plowed. Look, I said, your lips are moving, but I'm not listening to a single word. Your words have no meaning. Stop talking. Stop transferring money. He blinked. He tried one more time to explain, to argue, to rationalize why the money hadn't been transferred to Dennis. Something about misplaced wire transfer numbers, but rational explanations will never override a moral authority frame. At one point, I saw the realization across his face. He knew that he had picked a weaker frame. In fact, he tried the moral authority frame for himself. You know what? I've had enough of this. Get out of here now, and I'm going to call the cops. But it was too late for him. He had already picked a weak analyst frame and had overcommitted to it, and was about to pay for doing so. It was time to frame disruption. I was ready to pulverize his frame into a puff of fine mist. I pulled out my phone and dialed the colleague, Sam Greenberg. I put him on a speaker and discussed the logistics of getting the FBI involved. Dramatic, yes. But Jim again knew at the moment we were 100% committed to following through. I was activating the primal fears in his croc brain. As soon as he became afraid, my frame would crush his and he would bend to my will. Let me paint a picture to you, Jim, I told him. You have seen SWAT teams in the movies. It happens just like that. They were going to swarm through this door, FBI accountants wearing Kevlar vests and Glock 22s, and the sheriff will be blasting pepper spray at anything that moves. Dogs will be barking, and they'll be fastening your hands behind your back with zip ties. Is that how you want today to end? Hog-tied, pepper sprayed, lying in the back of a black van with no windows. The other option is you start transferring money to us. Smash. That was the moral authority frame. Delivered with emotional realism, and here I achieved the hook point. Our frames had collided. My frame had absorbed his. The only option were my options. There's a moment in games of strategy when the other side realizes no matter what moves it makes, the game is lost. This was that moment. I now had his full attention. Although it was his office and his domain, I had seized the high status position. Although he still had our money, $640,000, I had the frame control. Jim, starting right now, every 15 minutes, you're going to give me a deliverable. That means, just so you understand me perfectly, every 15 minutes something happens that benefits me. Cancel your schedule. Do not leave this room. Pick up the phone and stop finding our money. He was listening and I continued. I need the money wired to Dennis' account right now. Just because you have the frame control doesn't mean that someone won't push back. You just stay committed to your frame and keep it strong. You plow. Jim started with more NBA doublespeak, returning to rationalization mode. So I expanded the frame to include new characters and new consequences. Listen, Jim, stop, I told him. Get your friends and family and investors list and start dialing for the money. Every 15 minutes, you need to hand me a wire transfer confirmation. This was the point of consolidation. Because I had done everything right up to this point. There was no need to make threats or create drama. The frame was set. The agenda was my agenda because the social interaction was being governed by my frame. There were the rules Jim had to follow. Rule number 1, everything happening must involve Dennis' money. Rule number 2, something good must happen every 15 minutes. Rule number 3, the meeting isn't over until $640,000 is wired. I sat with Jim for 6 long hours as he dialed associates, family members, and friends. The money came rolling in, small investments, small increments, $10,000 here or $15,000 there. As I mentioned earlier, when two mental frames come together, when they collide, the stronger frame disrupts the absolutes and absorbs the weaker frame. I'd controlled the frame, started it small and expanded it. And Jim's weaker frame collapsed. His internal state went from non-challenge and arrogance to panic and desperation. His status went from high to low, responding to my frame. He raised Dennis money, and we walked out with all the $640,000 irrevocably secured via wire transfers. Mission accomplished. Over the next few days, Dennis and I and some other victims worked with the authorities, and Southwest Exchange was raided. I got Dennis $640,000 out just in time, thanks to my knowledge of framing. Not for a moment was it about threats or power play. Although it was Dennis' money, legally perhaps Jim and Don McGann never should have given back that $640,000. It wasn't in their best interest. If Jim McGann really thought I was going to call the FBI, he should have wired that money to his attorney. It was clearly the last bit of cash Jim and Don McGann could scratch together. I had always respected the nature of frame control, but now, with Dennis' $640,000 back in my escrow account, I was learning to rely on it more and more often. All told, the McGann had built more than 130 investors out of more than $180 million. Several people lost their life savings, and the case spawned numerous lawsuits. In 2009, Don McGann, age 75, was sentenced to a 10-year prison sentence for wire fraud. This is an example of owning the frame. There are still more frames that we'll encounter that I haven't discussed yet. Let's take a look at time-based frames and how to respond to them. We'll read about it tomorrow in the next live. That was it. That was it for today. It was good. I mean, thematic. I just felt like I was watching a Hollywood movie. Like, police is waiting outside, transfer the money. Like, just dramatic. Anyhow, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, subscribe it now so you can hear these kind of stories and examples, and how salespeople use different options to get things done. So you can learn about that as well. So thank you so much, and subscribe to my channel so anybody who let them know about it as well, so people can get benefit from it. Thank you, and take care of yourself. See you in the next live. Bye bye.